going to go down to, I don't know, 10, 12 cents in February. But even at that rate, you can get a much lower rate,
Yeah,
7, 8 cents.
yeah,
If you go online, this is for a consumer, I'm not talking about for an industrial customer or a commercial customer. If you go online to the Public Utilities Commission, they have a whole list of suppliers,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you what the story is. And in most cases, you can opt out when the rates go down, and when you opt out, there's no charge.
yeah. I have a number in my head that I don't feel 100% confident, so I'm not gonna say it, but I will email you all to let you know what it is. I believe it's under that 7.
Okay. And your contract is fixed so that you can't get out of it, and whatever it is in it is what you're putting in the budget?
Correct, yep, we're continuing to budget for what the bills come in as.
Gary?
On page 18, I'm looking at the top 3 supply lines for library, computers, and school board. The 22-23 actuals are significantly lower than the 23-24 budget and the proposed, which is the same as this current year. Do you have actual numbers to date on what you've spent so far this year for
I could get those for you. I don't have that report with me. We did look at the actuals as we were building the budget, so it's a great question. So specifically for the supply lines.
Yes.
Okay, I think that gets us down to 19, and 19's also, everything's is flat. And with 20. We did, if you remember last year, we did some work with combining, and so discipline area, we kind of had them scattered. We had books, math books, and we had math software, and all of that is now combined within math supplies. And so I think next year, as the 22-23 actuals fall off, or the 22-23 budget falls off, it's gonna be even a little bit cleaner. So we're plugging away at that. So going to page 21, middle of page 21, the 15,000 is our NEASC accreditation visit. That is, so schools, high schools particularly, we want them to be accredited. They need to be accredited, and there is a cost to that. We do a self-study, which we did last year, and then we have a team of educators around the state or the region who come, and they see if we're doing what we said we were doing, and they'll present us with a report, and we'll get an accreditation, lose an accreditation. We're not losing our accreditation, but some districts have, and so I think we're in good shape. But that's what that cost is, and then that will go away the next year.
You said it's going away next year. How often do we do this?
It's a 10-year process, so we did have money 2 years ago that paid stipends to teachers for the self-study, because it's an awful lot of work to do that self-study. So there was money in the budget for that. It went away this year because we didn't have those costs, and now the visiting comes in, we have to host that visiting team, and then the costs go away, and we'll start it all over again in 10 years when we've got to do the self-study again.
Thank you.
And then we've got, jumping down to interest goes down, principal goes up, which gets us to our increase.
Any questions?
Yep. The difference between the default and the proposed is only 62,833, which is about a 0.5%. We returned over 600,000 last year, and that's historically been somewhere in that range because of fair for us to assume that if you lived with it, that if you got a default budget, that 60,000 is no problem to cover?
I won't say that, but it, and I don't anticipate next year we're gonna be in the same spot because we won't have ESSER funds.
Right.
But we will live within the budget we get.
Okay. Can I go one more question? Because before we shift over to where? The contingency fund
Yes.
that got voted in 2 years ago, despite our committee voting 13-0 against it, but it was the special election in the middle of the summer when not too many people voted. That can be as much as 5% of the net assessment.
Yes.
Do we know what that number is now? It's going up every year, right? The net, the 5% of the net assessment is what's the cap?
Net assessment's basically what we get from the town offices.
Yeah, do you know what
So-
that is now? That's what it's capped at, right?
I unfortunately don't have that on my local drive, and I don't have internet access, but
Okay, well, it's
it's,
probably close to 500,000 or so, somewhere in there. It was 489 in 2021.
the 5% you're saying.
The 5%,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, it's not gone up substantially.
Okay. How much is in that now, do you know? Has it-
350,000.
So something has been spent out of that?
It is not.
Has not, so it's still
They've decided to not fully fund it in the last two.
right.
2
They
years.
did the first year, so rather than 350 coming back to the taxpayers, that funded that in the first year.
Correct.
And then they haven't added anything to it, even
Right.
though they could, because it went up a
Yeah.
little bit.
And each year they could have done more. They've
Right.
stayed with
So
350.
they haven't used anything in 2 years.
Yep.
Okay. Suggestion. As we look to next year, this is not in our world, it's in your world. Contracts are important. John Stark will have a teacher's contract next year. Okay, you got 350,000 sitting in that fund that hasn't been touched in 2 years. Rather than wait for a petition article to do away with that fund, the way it was passed originally was kind of in the shadow of darkness, shall we say, on a special vote over the summer. I would suggest maybe you look at saying, we haven't used anything in 2 years, we could use that money, maybe if we dissolve that account and to offset maybe the
That-
cost
that
of
is
a teacher's
actually-
contract.
That's actually a conversation that we have every year at the board in August. We discuss whether or not, when to increase or decrease that fund in order to manage the tax rate. So we have some big decreases in state funding coming. So using that money at those times when we potentially have decreases in revenue that are out of our control, would be beneficial in those times, but we have that conversation every year, and that's part of the reason why the number has stayed the same as opposed to going up to the legally allowed
Because I'm
amounts.
suggesting you do it at one time to get rid of that account, zero it out, and use it towards the teacher's contract next year. It just is a suggestion. And whether that's possible or not, I don't know, but that,
No, I just follow up with a discussion we had last year, which is probably gonna come up again and again, and that is that when the default and the proposed budget are close, we look at that fund and say, why should we go this way rather than that way? Because they have that contingency fund to make up the difference anyways. And that's been a point of discussion, since that passed. Because normally, and again, I'm not going to go back and criticize it's done, but in the past, if there was money that was reserved, it was usually on a warrant article by itself and it had a purpose, rather than a contingency fund that was just kind of open-ended. And that has influenced our decision over the years on whether to support the proposed budget as opposed to the default budget.
yeah.
Just so you're aware of that.
Yeah, it's an irritant, I guess, is a good way to describe it.
Thank you, Tom. You're going to have enough money each year, as you have in the past, regardless of this contingency fund, to take care of all of the expenses that you want in either the proposed or the default budget, because there is so much money that isn't spent. That to me is another reason for the board doing the responsible thing, although it loses some flexibility for them, but not much considering the money that isn't spent, to get rid of it. That's the argument in favor of Bill's position. My question is this: Chris, you said that we're going to get less money from the state. Could you explain why?
So, this past year, the adequacy went up. The obligation from the state, they had increased the per student amounts in the normal adequacy calculation. After that calculation was done, if a community was not increasing a certain amount, I'm blanking on, I think it was 4%, I believe. If the adequacy didn't increase from the previous year's estimate by at least 4%, they provided an additional grant in the adequacy grant to bring it to 104%. That grant that they provided outside of the normal calculation will decrease every 2 years for the next 10 years,
Are we talking now about
unless
either
things
school
change.
district?
Yes, where,
Yeah.
or where?
Yeah, not just,
This is
we're
not
not just on John.
Yeah, when we get adequacy, it's where's adequacy and it gets distributed.
So, why are we losing money? Because our population is dropping?
Because they discontinued the stabilization grant.
Where loses in the calculation of how they're recalculating?
But we can only lose if our population is declining, no?
No, the stabilization grant, prior to the changes this year, was a grant that was outside of the per pupil calculation. So it was at the end of their spreadsheet that they give us every year. That grant was discontinued. That's why we required the additional 4% grant outside of the adequacy calculation to keep us whole. Well, to keep us at the 4% increase,
What
I
was
should
the
say.
original purpose of the stabilization?
That's that's an old, it kind of lived past its life when it was first voted, is my understanding, but that was before I was in school finance, to be honest.
Before you were in elementary school, or? Just kidding, I'm sorry.
So if it lived past its life, this means it's not needed. So why are we moaning about it, especially because you
I don't
always
believe I
have-
did.
Well, I'm not picking on you, but we always have enough money coming back. We are not short money coming back from the schools.
And I would like to speak to that, because I do not anticipate going into next year's budget and the budgets after that, we are gonna have as healthy a bottom line. I think the fact that we've had as much coming back as we have over the last 3 years has been a testament to the fact that we've been very careful with the ESSER money to make sure it was also a benefit to the taxpayers in addition to doing what we needed to do for students. And so during that time, we have made significant cuts within all of the lines of our budget in both Ware and in John Stark. And so we're going to be spending our budgets. And so I am not anticipating that we are going to be returning as much moving forward at all.
Moving forward is beyond this.
Beyond this year, we still have ESSER money that we're leveraging, and so anytime anything comes up as a need, how can we use ESSER for this? Because we've got it and we want to spend every penny of it. And so,
And how much are we losing in stabilization aid for this 24-25 year?
nothing for this, well, for
Not-
stabilization, because they're making us whole, it's called a hold harmless
Yeah.
for 2 years. After the 2 years, we lose 20%, and so we can share that calculation.
But for this budget,
It doesn't impact this budget.
so why did we bring it up? Just to let us know?
We brought it up in reference to the contingency fund and how we use that to manage the tax rate increases.
In relation to
and dips.
contingency fund.
How much ESSER money is in this budget? Or, excuse me, how much ESSER money are you spending that's not in this budget?
So you have the ESSER report and what we've done each year. and we, okay, I mean, we did share
Yep.
a whole bunch of everything that we have, and,
Don't remember the number.
yeah.
The current grant is in the $400,000 range.
And we'll spend all of that in 24, 25.
We need to spend it by September of 2024.
And so 25, 26, we start off with a hole of $400,000 in the budget.
We did a lot of one-time costs, so we bought the literacy program. A lot of the one-time costs of that literacy program, we would need a new literacy program. But rather than have it be a taxpayer cost, it was a cost within ESSER.
So
I
it
mean,
won't
that's a
be the
great,
full, it won't be the full 400,000.
it will not be the full four. And we were really, I mean, that was also something we heard, and why we had to report out, and rightfully so, why we had to report out each month on how we spent the ESSER money. And heard loud and clear that we didn't want everything that was in the ESSER fund, we didn't use a lot of positions, because we would be coming to you in this budget with $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in all these costs that, and we didn't do that. We were very careful about how we used that money. We also weren't allowed to take things out of the budget and supplant anything that's in the budget.
We've been, pardon me? Bill, you first.
No, it's just historically on the amount returned to offset taxes. I don't want to make it sound like the world's going to fall after ESSER funding, because in 2017, this is before ESSER, you know, Ware School District returned over $363,000.
That's where, what about Stark?
It was $493,000 that came to us, I believe. I think that 70% was already applied there. The next year, Ware was 461 and Stark was 474. 2019, 324 and 307. Now, when you start hitting COVID, it was 789,000 for Ware and 301,000 from Stark, 576,000. So it went up, and 952,000 was the big one in 2022. Got returned from Ware District. 597,000 from Stark. So it did bump up, but still
300.
300, 400. There was still 700,000 or 800,000 between the two school districts that came back prior to COVID.
And so, you know, speaking to the delta in the health insurance is one piece and breakage. But, you know, I didn't say the sky was gonna
Maybe that will
fall.
continue, yeah.
I just said, like, you're not gonna see the $600,000 and $700,000. No, I do not anticipate seeing the
Well,
$600,000 and
that's okay.
$700,000.
Yeah, that's a better number, you know, that puts a number on it.
Tom has a
Going
question.
With that philosophy, generally speaking, in a company, in a household, when you have that kind of surplus that you're returning, and we're talking like the 300,000 or 400,000, we're not going into the, gee, what happened in the last 3 years business. That's still money that we had, that we got from the taxpayers that we didn't use. And that's money that belongs to the taxpayers, that if they didn't have to pay it out, they could have done something else with it. So all I'm asking is, are we looking a little more fiscally so we are not having such large?
And can we put it in context? Because I agree with you, absolutely. But we're talking 3% and 4% that we planned 18 months out in some cases. So that isn't it's a huge amount of money. It's not a huge percentage of what we're managing. And we lean towards wanting to give back, have it fall to the bottom line.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing.
Right, but I don't disagree with it, but when you're talking about the percentage that you manage.
Yes.
Remember, households have to manage, and they don't have the flexibility the schools do or the towns do, and that's one thing I'm very concerned about this year.
Just, we're getting, like, at the halfway point. We've been about an hour on John Stark. I'd like to move on to Ware soon. I don't want to leave anybody's questions out. So, is there anything else related directly to the budget here that we're working on, John Stark, before we move on to Ware Schools? Tom, excuse me. I should remember that, right?
It's all right, yeah. Could I jump back to page 18 for 1 second?
Of course.
Supplies, 610, the first section. It's the bottom line is 610, is going down $11,000, but, maybe you answered this, but I didn't catch it. You're proposing 318,000, it's like $100,000 more than 22, 23 actuals. Where does that 100,000 exist? You got 214,000 in actuals, and you're proposing 318, and last year the budget was 329. Why is there such a big gap in that grouping?
I'd like to look at the actuals and share the actuals for where we are right now and how on track we are, because we did go through each of those and look at, what I say to my principals is, you know, if it's not spent by the time I go to the finance committee, do you need it? And so, we are having those conversations, right?
Jackie.
And there's also the shift that Jackie spoke to, coming
Yeah.
out of books,
Your
coming out
consolidation.
of, coming out of equipment, coming out, like, all of those lines were lines that we had 1,000 here, 1,000 there, and people weren't seemingly spending it, so we decreased them and brought them up to the supplies where they were spending. So, like Jackie said, that those 22, 23 actuals were under when we had all of those lines.
Split out?
Yeah.
So,
So
okay.
there's a little bit of normalization happening.
Okay. 100,000's a lot, but,
But we consolidated
Yeah.
an awful
Yeah.
lot.
I wouldn't say it's all of, like, that's all of it, but that's a percentage of it.
okay. All right, yeah, that makes sense, thank you.
Go ahead.
Two questions, question and a comment. First, what was the number that you said we were losing from the state aid for this next budget, for the budget we're working on now, 24, 25?
We're not for this budget.
We're
It's-
not losing any
no,
money for this?
no.
Okay. And the other is a comment. I really hope the selectmen heard what you said. A very important observation. You said to your folks, if you haven't spent it by the time we go to the finance committee, do you really need it? The selectmen in Ware have been known to spend a lot of money at year end.
I don't think that belongs to the table at this time.
There was a selectman in the room, and I thought he really needed to hear this.
Public comment in the selectmen's meeting.
Well, we manage a bunch of budgets, Tom, or we comment on a bunch of budgets, so they're interconnected.
We're talking philosophically now, not dollars and cents, so. All right, let's go to the Ware School District.
The fun one. This is the one where everybody just, where Jackie just.
All right, so, we'll do the same thing if you're up for it. I am, okay. So if you skip through the default, go to the where proposed, skip through the function summary and the object summary, and move to, it should say Finance Committee, where proposed object budget. All right. So, some of the things happening with this first page and the salary lines. There are 4 position cuts. That is different. I think we started off with 2 on Tuesday, and Chris has been working magic between to get ready for tonight. But there's 2 additional positions cut out of this budget. There's also, so those are the big decreases there. If you go down, you'll notice the BCBA salary in there. BCBA is behavioral support. That is a need within IEPs. It is a position we're currently using some grant funding for, IDA grant funding, but it's, remember when I said we needed to open up the budget for the unanticipated needs, the grant budget for the unanticipated needs that we have. It's also much cheaper we were able to hire someone. It is cheaper to hire someone in this position, and I'm gonna say the same thing for the school psychologist, than to contract out by a lot. And so the fact that we have somebody, and getting that position into the budget, which is directly connected to student needs, is why that you'll see that there.
Yes. Go ahead.
In regards to that line item, you're saying it's vastly cheaper. Does that include the steps that go into all these contracts? Does that include insurance? Does it include dental? How does that
All
include vacation? Because if you add that all in, that's a pretty big chunk.
It is, and it's still cheaper than contracting.
Okay.
And so you'll see on page 2, the school psychologist, which is even more the case, having a salaried school psychologist is much, much cheaper. So every IEP starts with an evaluation, and they do testing, and having somebody in-house doing that is a good thing for the Ware School District. Going down, you see occupational therapy, treasurer, school admin. These are all, they were increases that happened in the wage pool, and this is how they got distributed. The custodial salaries on page 3. This is a combination of things. We found we needed to increase, our custodians are not within the collective bargaining agreement. We needed to increase wages, and we did that. We also created 2 lead positions to kind of, be the and did, head, right.
Supervisor?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and for the next batch on page 3, this is our support staff. We are in the 2nd year of a collective bargaining agreement with our support staff. We also have, so extended school year, Lori, we were talking about, we also have extended school year that happens in the Ware School District, and that is special education programming. Class aid, okay, so you've got all those positions. So an overall increase of 15,600. We'll go into negotiations next year.
Catching up.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
It's the same question I asked for John Stark, because I don't have a copy of the contract. If you can tell me what the percentage of that contract year, not the bulk number, not the final dollars and cents. I wanna know the percentage that they get in that step increase for this year.
For Wes, the
Yes.
support staff.
Where? Yes, please. And I want the same for John Stark, obviously. Thank you very much.
And those are the warrants, right?
That would be the bulk.
Okay. So we're on page 4. District-wide benefits, and Bill, that's that line, that then gets distributed, and it's condensed here. And so those increases represent the 12.1 GMR. Census change, GMR is the guaranteed maximum rate of the health insurance. So that's the highest it can be. Census changes and position cuts.
On your insurance, you go out to bid on that often.
We looked at it last year, and did like a full, and we're gonna start in this year. We didn't do it for this time in, but we are going to do it we're starting that process. I think we have a meeting on like March 16th or something, so.
Great, thank you.
And we also, there are people within the SAU board really interested in this, and there've been talks of, and it makes my head spin a little, but health self-insurance, and do we,
You have to be very careful when you get involved. big bite in the tail if you get it the wrong.
Right, and so that is something that,
The head spinning.
yes. I don't need another thing to keep me up at night.
I would think that the size of the client base has a lot to do with that, whether it's feasible.
Right,
But it's more the dynamics of the base, what your schism is for ages and sexes and all that stuff, right, wrong, good or bad. That's
Right.
the exposure rate.
right, right. So then, page 4, 5, 6, we've got the related, pluses and minuses within LTD, FICA, retirement, ending on page 11. We do not have support staff health insurance, but what we do have is a small, I think it's $500 flex plan, 300, under $500, flex plan for support staff.
Yeah, could you explain that?
So it's like a flex spending account. We put money into, or actually, do we just give a,
It goes to an FSA.
we give money to an FSA, and it's, right, and it's,
Exactly 500.
It-
I just looked it up.
is that in the contract or is that current?
Cur-
That's-
current,
Oh,
yeah.
because we're in where? Sorry,
Yes.
getting my,
Yeah,
okay.
I did it too, I
Yes,
did it too.
yes, so they get $500. We pay $500 towards support staff health insurance, period.
The town does and companies do too. Will often do like a buyout,
Yes,
10,000, depending upon how big your company is,
Yep.
but they usually do between 2 and 4, sometimes 5. So that you're not getting hit with the full impact of somebody's insurance if they stick to their husband's insurance. We take a lighter hit, yes, you're paying out money, but it eases the exposure rate and the long-term effects of that.
Yes.
Do we do that?
we do it for teachers and we do it for anyone, who gets health insurance from us. We
What is
don't,
the buyout?
it depends on I think it's $4,000.
It varies in so many different ways. There's, I believe the WARE contract has it tiered based on how many people opt out of insurance. So if more people opt out, the amount goes up. But
That's unusual,
it's,
very unusual.
it's, I believe it's either, it's also based off what insurance they would take. So it's either 3 or 5, depending on who they are.
About $3 and $5 or?
3,000 and 5,000.
Thank you.
So a single plan versus the family plan.
Just checking, thank you.
Trying to incentivize if you have the choice to take a spouse's health
town does
insurance,
it, I think,
or
is it-
more often now, parents. If we have a 24-year-old teacher and they have incentive to
On their parents
stay on
until
their
they're
parents.
26.
Right.
Okay, Tom?
Well, I have a quick question on page 11, teacher retirement 232, the bottom line, top of page 11. Is that strictly driven by teachers, teacher population? It went down, so I was curious.
It did go down because of the 4 positions,
Okay.
and, we do not have support staff contributing. We do not contribute, they are not part of the retirement system for New Hampshire. That is an unusual,
Right, right, yeah,
that is unusual,
For WARE school district specifically.
right.
right,
John Stark, actually, they do.
right. No, but it went down from the last budget, the last budget published. So I was just wondering if that was just driven strictly by head count.
Usage, census,
Okay.
and because it's income-based, and so if we hire teachers who are less expensive.
Okay,
We will next year, I don't know what it'll be, but the rate changes next year. Last year, we had actually a decrease, it was a slight decrease in retirement.
Yes.
And a few years ago, there was a huge hit, and that was terrible.
Right.
It derailed everyone's budgets.
thanks.
So, support staff are not part of the retirement system?
Support staff are not.
They opted not to, right?
No, I think that's the school district has to make a decision about that. It's a pretty, you know, it's a significant
It's
contribution,
a heavy cost.
yes.
Yeah.
and
Is that
you
part of
want
the
other things.
negotiation?
It's not, I mean, I suppose, but if support staff were part of it, everyone would be part of it. Right now, only certified, which we have to, that's a requirement for the certified staff. And so it's an all or nothing thing for support staff. It's not like just the paras could negotiate that. It would then apply to custodians, and it would apply to secretaries and across the board. Right, health insurance would be, I think,
Skyrocketing.
where we'd go next if, also a big cost, yes. Okay, so that's the flex plan, like in Stark, the tuition course, teacher conferences, those are all in the collective bargaining agreement. You know, we've got the insurances, workers' comp, those are actuals. We have the SAU shares, that's the SAU budget, 92,000 increase. Where in the calculation is a higher percent?
I was trying to find my place.
Sorry,
So it's
middle of
12.
page 12.
Middle of
Page 12.
311.
Well, I'm not back on page 11, so that really mucks everything up. But I noticed the tuition reimbursement for 22-23 was 19,950,000. You actually spent 1,953, and yet we are still proposing $19,950. So, I mean, little bit, huge chunk.
So that's in the, that number is in the collective bargaining agreement.
We budgeted 19,950 the year before that, too.
Yes, it's a flat number. We have been in a spot where it's been difficult for teachers to do additional outside professional development, take courses. They're just in a tough spot. So there hasn't been as much of that and so, you know, in negotiations, they would be reluctant to get rid of that until things have normalized. And so I think, you know, it could be a topic for discussion in future negotiations. Where are we? The SAU, middle of 12, we've got the SAU and those shared positions, with those salary increases. And then we get into contracted services on page 13. Again,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The SAU contribution, does that go in the default budget, the increase?
the increase does.
It does.
Yeah. The increase for the SAU budget does. The increase for the shared staff does not. So under that, the instructional coaches, the community outreach position, we now share technology. Those positions, those increases are part of our wage pool,
Okay,
and that's where they get the increases.
okay.
So 13 is primarily special education services, and the pluses and minuses are identical to what we talked about at Stark, as far as what they are. And so we have contracted services around behavioral counseling, the BCBA work. Extended school year, that 13.5 is a special education, but there's also a lot of decreases within the vision and audiology, special ed tutoring, PT, contracted services. On to page 14. The increases within at the bottom of the page, information tech, those are, we have the shared staff, and so we have 4 people within the SAU, and they specialize in how they support the district. This is a shift, so we have a network person, rather than Ware having their own network person. We share that. We have some, the kind of Google admin and web-based work, and then the wires, the hardware, and all of that. We share those services, and this was a way and an effort we've been making across the SAU to how do we share resources and expertise to save everyone money and to get better services.
So is this person?
People. We've done these shared positions that for quite a while. I mean, that's what I was talking about with the facilities. We were doing facilities as a shared position. It makes it so Ware certainly doesn't need its own network administrator. But the SAU needs a network administrator who can, and so he manages now the whole SAU, and we charge back to the different districts. They also all take tickets and do the simple things.
So, these are SAU employees, correct?
No.
What I'm trying to find out is where they get paid as to who decides their raises and who controls the finances, because and I'm not picking, so
Yep.
I'm just
Yep.
making statements. So for the SAU, we have no controls on what you do with the SAU. With the schools, we do have some say, and I'm just trying to figure out where this fits in.
If our proposed budget and the wage pool for those who are outside the collective bargaining agreement doesn't go through, I'm gonna have to make some choices about who gets what raises. So you control it. I award the raises, the increases.
Thank you.
Auditors have gone up, again, that extra thing we have to go through. Some increases and decreases at Centerwood, increase at middle school for disposal services, decrease in snow plowing. And then we go to the bottom of 15 and top of 16 where we have repairs. Overall, those are decreases. And I'm gonna will you explain the grounds? Because that was an accounting, we were doing it differently in the 2 districts, in the 2 schools.
The shifting.
Yes, so middle of page 16. If that looks more dramatic.
Yeah, so there's shifting. Yeah, there's a $9,000 increase there. So there was some shifting from like supplies. So, for instance, when we put playground chips down at the playground, we don't buy the chips. We pay someone to distribute the chips in a safe manner across the playground. So it's a contracted service as opposed to being a supply. And so there's some shifts away from supplies into that line to show what we're actually doing. We're paying someone else to do the work as opposed to buying supplies.
So they're supplying and doing the work.
Right, and so it can't be both places, so the more accurate line is the repair and maintenance line. So it's shifting.
Tom?
Well, I don't know where to go with this one. I'm asking you, I've been telling you, but I think last time we had one right now, too. Generator, working on the lighting, because this is all related to the building and the school.
Yes.
What line line item does this all come under on making sure that we buy a generator, that it works, the fuel for the generator, cause it takes oil, and we're making sure that we get things hooked up appropriately? Where does that come in the budget?
We would work under probably general repairs, or we'd put it under, I mean, we're on a default, so we're looking under, you know, where our repair lines first, but if we need to shift, we'll shift.
As we go forward, if we're doing things like that, is there a way to ask you to see what the costs are, so we understand, I understand?
Oh,
it?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, and, I mean, they would come within the repair and maintenance lines.
Okay, thank you.
Electrical repair, maybe? I mean, we could
My
fit it in.
My laptop just died, but I'm pretty sure that we have a generator maintenance plan annually. I'm fairly certain that she's right, it's in the general repair and maintenance, for our facilities.
Take a look because of the blackout on election day.
Well, that started
No,
it, now other
I thought
things
that's
are
what you
going
were,
with
I
it,
thought
but
that's what you were doing.
in general, you just wanna know where these things are, because it's something that they have, it costs money, it uses fuel, and, you know, at that point, somebody must be doing something with it.
Yep, it's a repair and maintenance. All right, and so unless there are questions on any of those repair and maintenance lines, we'll go to page 18. You'll see the transportation, the first two lines are our regular transportation. We use more buses and have more students in the Ware School District, and so those increases are more than they were at Stark, but it's the same contract. And then transportation for special education includes what you're gonna see as 3 additional out-of-district placements for students. As a big chunk of.
All right.
So, I've been on the subcommittee for the town, and a bunch of folks have come up and said that there's like a traffic problem at the middle school. So we're paying this amount of money to bus kids. Is there any efforts being done to try to get the kids to actually take the buses instead of have these cars at the school?
Yeah, that would, I mean, we can bus them. We drive by their stops.
I'm just like, you know, all these people coming up saying there's a ton of traffic, so just, I'm like, we're paying for the buses, like, what can we do to get the kids to get on the buses? And so, I don't know, I just didn't know if you guys, like, started a campaign for busing or anything.
Yeah, cause they're not full.
Or it could be family circumstances, nobody at home, so neighbors picking them up. You know, all kinds of different situations that it could be that, don't relate to people who just hop on a bus and find somebody at home when they get there, you know. Tom?
Do you guys have any sense for the number of students that don't take a bus? Do you count any of that, or you just?
We did a survey last fall, we did a transportation survey, and it's actually, I think it's on our website, but,
Okay.
if not, I can send it to you.
Yeah, if it's up there, I can find it.
I have a follow-up to Tom's question. Did the survey have, or for the survey that you mentioned, did it ask why parents don't have their kids take the bus?
Yeah,
I'd actually be curious
yeah.
about that.
No, it was, I will send it to you, but I'm fairly certain it's on our website.
Okay, oh, thank you.
Sometimes it's tricky to find.
Could you just tell, what's the enrollment change for where?
For where we are going from,
I thought I had minus 73 in my head.
70, 50 to 70 kids at that, I think is what I remember.
so we had 899 last year, and we have 832 this year.
77.
I'm sorry, the second one?
77?
67, oh, 67, yeah, I'm sorry.
67? Okay.
899,
67.
832, was it 67?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But transportation goes up when there's fewer students, or it's special education.
You know how big Ware is?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It all depends on the routes that you have to put together.
It's the routes, it's not the number, it's not a per student, it's the
Doesn't go with the
routes.
enrollment. It's not an even,
Right, I
match.
mean, at Stark, we don't have as many runs, because not as many students ride the bus, right, as a lot of our juniors and seniors drive themselves, and so, that overall cost is less. And so in that way, but we plan for that. It's harder to plan for the littles.
Just because, I don't know, when we're talking about buses, because it's about cost, are we picking up kids that are 3 blocks from the school? Do we have a limit of where we pick people up? I mean, are we picking them up across the street?
Well,
No, I do.
I mean, there aren't that many students who live across the street, but, I mean, it's 114, and, so we would.
I know in the city,
I mean, not if you're on, what's the road, if somebody lives in the apartment building, you know, across, I'm assuming they walk
East Road.
across on East Road. But, we also don't want students walking down Center Road. I wouldn't. So. Okay. Oh, good.
the survey.
Great,
Thank
thank you. Hmm? I can send that, Lori, yes, yes.
I can send it to you, Lori. I can send it to the board if you're interested.
It also speaks to, we actually have pressure for more bus stops and more pickups, not consolidated bus stops, and, you know, in that we have to work through with people.
Right.
Okay. Oh,
Just real quick,
Yes.
Dr. Coe, on that contract that you have for the buses, is it based on volume? Is it based on, because I see in the actuals in 22, 23 were far less than the budgeted. So is that, I mean, you have a contract,
We do have a contract.
what they charge you is based on the number of students they carry, or it's just each year, this is what it's gonna be in anticipation of how many routes we're gonna have, or how many students we're gonna carry? Why?
I talked to earlier about how we did really well during COVID, and with our staffing overall. We have had times where
you had some days where they were no school, right? I mean, it was remote learning or whatever, maybe.
well, we also had to consolidate some bus routes, which made it,
Yeah.
and so there have been times when we haven't had enough
Right.
drivers, and they've consolidated, and we don't pay for a bus
Okay,
that,
so that's an anomaly, okay.
I don't anticipate that,
Got it.
That's per run per day.
Okay,
because we do also get grief around how long kids are on the bus. So where was I? I think 18, so the special education transportation I talked about, and then increases in property insurance. We had some decreases in the telephone, but you'll notice there's increases under data, which I actually think evens out just about, so that's just a shift. Our internet was within telephone, it's more accurately represented in the data communications line. On to page 19, cuts within advertising. A lot of that is within trying to hire people, and other board printing, doing some cuts around there. And then we get to the Whopper, the tuition to private. Those are out-of-district placements. We are seeing some extraordinary needs. We actually have lower out-of-district placement than a lot of our neighbors. We're pretty committed to try to keep students in the district. It's, in general, better outcomes for all, but there are times when we can't meet those needs. That process, how that gets determined, like everything with special education, is a team of people that includes the parents and includes people from the school, educators, and talking through the individual plan for the students. So everything has to go through that team process before a decision is made about a student's placement. Page 20, I think the biggest thing here is the middle of the page. This is the 82,000 is that corresponding cut to pulling that director of facilities into the SAU. This, you know, it's not a lot, but this way actually saves Ware a little bit of money doing it this way. Going into supply lines, we did the same thing with the supplies is Ware last year as we did in Stark. And so we're trying to consolidate those lines and look at usage. And so there's an overall cut of 18,000 in our supply lines. If you go to the bottom of page 22. Also cuts within electricity at the top of page 23. And then you'll see a lot of zeros, and that's, as we go through page 23 and 24, that is the moving of those lines to consolidate them into the supply lines. The same is true for 25, with the exception of something like new musical instruments, you know, keeping that is an actual equipment that we want it represented that way in the budget. '26, again, trying to carve out, well, actually, these are based on need, the first part of 26. Equipment that we don't need for the most part. And then what is the
We cut something.
okay.
Where are you and what do we need?
At the bottom of page 26, we're trying, there's a cut of 12.5 to the general replacement equipment at Centerwoods, and the reason I'm pausing is we are trying to create a plan for Centerwoods that replaces a classroom set of furniture or 2 classroom set of furniture every year and have that be a flat. Things are getting old. We have a lot of teachers who the dramatic story is we had a teacher who retired and a lot of the furniture was hers, and it was actually hers, and so we're trying to be more thoughtful and in keeping up the furniture in a way that's level. And so that's why I was surprised that we're gonna have to look at that line.
There is the furniture line down here that is partially what you're thinking.
Oh, okay.
but I wish I could recall what that cut
Okay.
is.
So I that just gave me pause because, but it actually makes sense. So actually, let's skip down to the middle of page 27 then. That is the line, that we are looking to, systematically replace furniture.
On that furniture.
Yeah.
Is it just chairs that sit and desks that you use, or are we doing the rocking chairs and the coloring and all that business?
Oh, we have that business, some of that business, yes, yes. We also have regular chairs, but, there's a mix.
I think she's referring to the middle school library.
Yes. Well, and so we have desks balls that kids sit on at their desk, and, yeah, we have flexible seating in some of our classrooms.
Which is desirable.
I also have a stand-up desk. So that's the middle of page 27. And it gets us to 28 and 29, which are the, decreases in debt service, increase in principal.
Question?
Sure, sure.
Top of 28, criminal checks go up a lot, but you're reducing staff. What's the increase due to? Is it just more expensive or a different kind?
Well, we hire a lot of people, and everyone has to have a background check. And additionally, the process that our support staff, paraeducators, have to go through with the state they added a new fee for the support staff and it's like $100. That it is not fair for someone who makes 15 or 16 bucks an hour to pay $100 to come work for us. So that is they have to do that background check to get the certification.
So is it just more turnover, just
We
more
have huge turnover, yeah.
Okay. The substitutes get background checks too?
Yes.
They do?
Volunteers get background checks.
Everybody, okay.
Question?
Early on, page 1 and page 2, you had those two positions that were better to have hired rather than contract out. Did I miss it, where contracted services went down an amount above that?
Contracted services, well, these were primarily funded in the grant.
Oh,
And that's what I was talking about with Neil about
Okay.
opening up that. Our grant, if do you remember, we used to share our, grant across the SAU, the special education grant. And now it's divided out by each district, which actually, we have less in Ware because of that. And so managing that,
basically you're hiring, you could contract out before, but it was provided by money that came in, grant money, and that's
Yes.
not there, so in order to continue, it's cheaper to do it by hiring in-house, and you're gonna have to put it in your operating budget.
right.
Okay.
And we had actually had it we had paid for the position out of the IDA grant, and we was able to hire a person, and actually, I think one of them we paid for out of ESSER. And so,
I gotta,
To clarify, we made the switch in the IDA grant, because that was what we were supposed to be doing all along.
okay.
You have another one?
I got another one, but if somebody else wants to, nobody else.
Follow up just on those 4 positions. When I was at the school board meeting, there was a question about possibly decreasing the positions, but then there was another discussion that they wanted to add a position for the pre-K. Is that still going on, and how does that affect these 4 positions, and where does that affect us in the budget?
the 4 positions are straight cuts. And so we will go from 85.5 positions to 81.5 positions.
Does that,
The preschool,
yep,
within, and we'll have to work with the board and with Jess, with the principal, if we prioritize the preschool going back to the way we had run it, we'll shift an interventionist or a special educator position within what we have,
thank you.
but not taking away from the,
Okay, mine's along the same lines, just expanded. The 4 positions are teacher positions?
Yes, not necessarily, so, you know, we had a good discussion at the board meeting, and, you know, I think I emailed Neil this afternoon, you know, there was some reticence to increase class size, and so we're gonna, I can't say we're cutting this position, this position, this position, but I can say there are 4 positions within the teaching
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah, you're hitting on where I'm going to. I'll just say this year, based on the information you had on
Yep.
your website, you've got, average class sizes of between 16, 18. You got one bubble in the 5th grade at 23. So you get an average of 18.7 students per classroom in grades 1, K through 5.
Yes.
I know you're planning, you don't know how many new, but, well, the housing market's kind of stabilized right now, driving out, so I don't envision a big change coming into town from where we're at right now, so planning should be easier as you move ahead. This year, like I said, 18.7, 28 classes or segments or sessions. This year alone, though, if you had cut a classroom in K1 and 4, for example, you would have had 21 in kindergarten, 21 and a half. You would have had 21 in the classroom in the 1st grade instead of 16.8. And even in the 4th grade, you would have had, I have it as 22.7 instead of 18.2. You would have had, you could have had 23 classrooms with an average of 20.9 kids in a class. Back in 2017, you had 22 kids in a classroom.
Yes.
When we plan ahead, are we trying consciously to keep the number of kids in a classroom under 20 at a higher cost to the taxpayers? Or are we looking at it saying 21, 22 it was good in 2017, why isn't it good today?
I mean, the conversation at the board level on Tuesday, they were more comfortable around the 20.
Okay, if you're more comfortable around the 20 or whatever, but I'm just saying that you got, the next thing we're gonna talk about is a contract.
Yep.
Contract is very important this year, but are we also looking at saying, if we want the contract, maybe we want to make sure that we're cutting down the number of classrooms, because people are money. Every classroom's about 100,000. You go from what you actually did this year to what you possibly could have by cutting three classes. That's $300,000. And as we look towards next year, are we doing the same thing? I just keep pushing that. And if you say, hey, it's a better educational outcome, we're trying to keep it under 20, a lot of school districts do that, just say it. But I think that on balance, the taxpayers are looking for balance.
I just have a philosophical comment.
Go ahead.
Well, it depends on the grade level, you know, 20 kids in kindergarten are not the same as 20 kids in 4th grade, you know. I mean, I can see the emphasis on keeping the numbers lower as the grades are lower, and maybe increasing them as the grades, because the very independence of the child changes as they grow. Then we reach a cutoff point when we get old and we become dependent again, but go ahead.
But I also looked at it philosophically now.
Yeah, okay.
I think our test scores were better in 2017 when we had more kids in the classroom. So, I don't know. I don't know if that is a direct, go ahead.
Yeah, is there, we got too many, did you want?
Yes, this leads into a very important discussion. We're spending $18 million a year in Ware, roughly the same amount in Stark. Could you tell us what we're getting for our money in terms of educating students? Specifically, how do the test scores in Stark compare with the state average? how do the test scores in Ware Elementary and Ware Middle School compare with state averages? You go back a little bit in time. We know some of the information, but we don't know all of it. The question is, are we spending money and getting the educational result that's reasonable for us to expect, at least the state average? Or are we not?
There's a lot to unpack with that question, Neil. I think many of you were when we presented academic data, the outcome data at the last board meetings. And our scores are not where we want them to be, absolutely.
Could you
And
give us
so-
just a general idea of where they are, how far below the state average, and for how long it's been the case?
I did not prepare that, but in where we are significantly below. I think I linked that for you,
did.
but, and so, if you're looking for me to say that we're below the state average, we are. That is not the case for everything in John Stark. I think our literacy scores are near the average.
And math is below.
Math is below. Yep.
In Stark, do we have the state imprimatur of failing school, the way we do in Ware Center?
And it's not failing school, but it is a targeted support, which is because of our special education. It was specifically that our identified students were not making the growth that we need them to make, to not have that designation. So it is a very targeted designation
So the
around.
the non-sped students are doing acceptably well in terms of state averages?
Acceptable is a loaded word. No, and
They're
we.
below the state average.
Yes.
But where we got the designation is specifically around the growth of our identified students. So that we have to, in order to get rid of that designation, we have to make sure those students see the growth that we need them to see.
Will that mean that other students will get less services than they otherwise would?
One of the things Natasha talked about is to improve student outcomes, there's a number of, there's lots of things that go into that mix. And it is also more than test scores, although test scores are part of that picture of outcomes. We have looked at all our resources. We leverage ESSER funds to buy some really quality resources for both math and for literacy. We are engaging in a lot of training with our teachers. One of the reasons our teachers aren't doing additional courses is because we're providing a lot of work around literacy and teaching, thank you, teaching literacy and doing that really well. And so pretty intensive training, and we've had lots and lots of folks go through that training. Same is true with math. We're looking at how we do math. So how we teach and the resources we use are one part of how we improve student outcome. Climate and culture is another, and both that's adult and student. We need to make sure that but we also can't do all of that training and do what we do for our teachers. And I'm proud of how we support teachers new to the field, and all our teachers, but teachers new to the field particularly because we deal with a lot of them. But we can't then have them leave and us have to start over. And that is the situation we're facing right now. And we have to somehow break that cycle. So teacher retention is a part of that. It all works together.
I think Tom was waiting to ask a question.
And
Yeah.
scores were low when I first got here also,
That's a tangent question, I'll come back to it.
and the loaded part is and because we don't pay the state average in Ware. And I don't believe that money equals better, like, and so that's why I feel like that's a loaded thing to bring up, but you talked about, are we getting what we're paying for? And if we just equate it, we pay below the state average. I reject that whole argument, but you put that out there, and so we're significantly below the state average. We're $2,500 below the state average per pupil cost. And so, but again, because that's not an argument I would, I wanted it out there along with our below the average test scores.
You mentioned in the last meeting that you hired 18 new teachers last year, and they're all staying, right?
That,
They're all retained? That's still true?
yes, we retained to this year, yes.
Okay.
But you lost 16 teachers.
Over, it's this person came, this person left. So the people we hired last year, we actually kept them for a second year. We want to keep them for the third year and the fourth year. The people we hired 2 years ago, they left.
8 of them left for other higher paying jobs. 4 of them left to go out of state, or
Yep,
4 of them retired.
right, because things happen, right.
So half of our entering class leaves in the third year at today's salaries.
We actually, and this is transitioning nicely into the collective bargaining agreement.
Yep.
We actually, and I think this has been most difficult, we had this bubble in our contract. Before I got here, the first levels of the grid were condensed. And so the idea was because within education, it's by how many years you've taught, and that's how you get paid. And so they condensed years 1 through 6 and made one step. And those folks traveled together as they progressed, which is fine if everyone stays. They'll get the increase, the 2, 3, 4% increase every year. If they don't look elsewhere, and if we're not trying to hire in. So now those folks in that bubble is in year 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and they can make, and I included that in the spreadsheet, they can make $20,000 more elsewhere. And then we can't hire people with experience or even, without experience. And so that's the problem we're facing. And so expanding that budget, the bubble, so that step 8 step 9 makes more than step 8, makes more than step 7, is part of what we did in this negotiation.
What did you do with the people who are off the grid?
Their increases are,
3.5% or something.
yeah, the increases are significant across the board. So I included a little grid and I broke it down. So we actually aren't as much off at steps 1 through 5. Which is part of why we can hire those new to the field. And so those increases, the first year increase is about 10%. And then our people who have been with us for 30 plus years, that's a 3.5% increase. It's the in-between, so 6 to 10 years, it's a 15%, and 11 to 30, it's 25%.
What?
And it's still, if you look at our grid, and I think I included it in there, I took all of our neighbors, and, I didn't include, somebody went to Hanover and made a gazillion, but, no, that's an anomaly. But I looked at the different places on the grid where and how we compare. So even with this new contract, we're gonna be, this is not a luxurious contract. It's a big price tag, but it puts us right around where Goffstown is, and Goffstown is a pretty practical middle,
Where Goffstown is today, or Goffstown will be in 24, 25?
and I show you the comparison for both. And so a lot of the districts I compared, including Goffstown,
When-
had already negotiated, I know what next year's
Their
is, so.
income levels are much higher than Ware, vastly.
No.
And I've actually run the towns and the income levels and how they're running. So when we talk about that, we need to think about it, but I don't know if we wanna discuss the contract here unless you're bringing the contract forward tonight.
The contract, we
Absolutely.
have details about it, it's a support staff
I understand about
one.
teachers. I have a niece that is a teacher. She's a special ed
Yeah.
teacher, and she's special ed in California. And, she works with special ed children. She takes a lesser salary, but she loves what she does. What I'm concerned about with these contracts, they have a guaranteed increase every year. The taxpayers do not. We are in a recession. Building is down by 60%. We are in a recession. We have a town that needs things. And at the end of the day, if we bankrupt some of our taxpayers, they either have to move out of this town, do with less. The taxpayers, if they have to tighten their belts, the schools need to decrease their needs too. You cannot demand more out of people who have nothing unless you're willing to tighten your belts too, and that's my big concern.
And I totally understand. It did not make sense to bring forward a contract that was, a $400,000 overall increase that would do nothing to help us to keep people, to hire people, to do any of the things that we need to do to improve student outcomes. And so a half measure at this point doesn't work. And so I am sympathetic, and I understand, and this was risky to put this forward,
8.2% increase?
and it's $900,000.
That's a huge,
It is huge.
huge. So we either cut a lot in the town, and we tell a lot of people to suck it up for a group of people, or we all need to play ball and start working together.
I mean, it is obviously up to the town what you decide. My obligation and what the board negotiated was a contract, I think the contract we need. And it's not, we're not paying what Concord or Hillsborough or any of the other districts,
We shouldn't, we're not Concord or Hillsborough.
Well,
We're
just,
but we do compete with their neighbors.
getting a little off track, I think, as far as focusing on the details of the budget.
Yep.
And if you have details of the proposed contract, we probably should move on to that.
And so I think those are the details. It's, there's a link to the language, of the contract within what I shared, but the language, is minor. There's not really anything substantial that happened with that. We, updated like our military leave, on advice of council, and it's things like that. And so it is salary.
You do the 8.2%, which is what you want. What are the steps? What are the increases on these steps for a 3-year contract?
Is that on the, did you get that up the
Yeah.
website?
Yeah, it's right off the website.
Yeah. It's a 2%, I mean, it's a 2-year contract. And the second year is much less. It's not, people just get the step.
Which is,
The computer died. And so,
I'm not trying to be difficult.
no,
know it's
no,
not- but the
I knew
average
this was gonna be the
taxpayer is not
conversation.
going to be running to the website, so it is important when we're talking about things that we can make it easy for the taxpayers to understand what we're saying. So what is the second year
It's about 400,000.
percentage? 4% step increase, 6% step increase, which is it?
In 25-26 on-grid increases average about 8%.
So far
Off-grid,
exceeding the cost of living
Yep.
and social security.
yes. And off-grid increases are 3%.
In year three?
There's no year 3, it's a
It's a
2-year
two-year
contract.
agreement.
It's 2 years.
Tom,
Yes,
the grid used to be 15 years.
No.
Now it's much longer.
20,
Well,
in year one,
year 1 is 20
And
and
what is it now?
15, and it goes back to 15. So
This is just for the bubble?
it's a correction of the bubble. Yep.
you know, when you say difference between steps, it varies, but when you get rid of the bubble, the people who would benefit from this are, I don't know the percentage of how many teachers you have that have been there 10 years or whatever, but that group that's in that, say, 13 or 14 years in, if you take somebody with the old table, in the old contract, at 13 years, if they only have a bachelor's, I think it's 49,009, but in year 14, under the new one with a bachelor's, it's 61. So you go from 49 to 61.
Right. It's
That
a
would be a
significant-
$12,000.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what you're telling me you're trying to do, you're really trying to, by getting rid of that bubble where you sat for 4 or 5 years, you're trying to retain people rather than have them walk out the door after 6 years.
Yes.
You gave that one example of a group that came through and then they left.
Right.
So if you had this in place, you might be able to retain those people, is what you're saying.
I think we would. I mean, I also included, because culture and climate, leadership, all of that plays into why people stay somewhere. It is not always about the money. It's, our staff are doing, they're working really hard and they love the kids here and so I'm not taking anything away from that.
Well, that's what your 4 literacy coaches are doing, right?
They
They're-
are,
yeah,
they are
that's what
supporting, they
you're
are
talking
running
about, yeah.
ragged, supporting people, because there's just a lot to learn when you're a new teacher, new to the field. We have people on alternative, certifications, and so, and we're supporting them, but that takes a lot of energy, and it,
Yeah,
So
Right.
what is the base salary hiring in?
it is, I'll tell you.
What are they coming in at,
Today or with the new contract?
if we get the contract?
thank you.
Today
42,
versus,
42,862 is the new contract. Today is 44,35.
they're going down?
No,
Going up from
Today
44 to
is
48.
44,35. New contract is 42,862. So you're going up about,
Am I getting this
4,400.
wrong?
4,400. So 40,400.
40,400.
What they're making now?
Yes,
Base.
yes,
40,400.
yeah. In year one of the new contract,
And if you hire somebody in, what are they gonna come in at?
I
In
just
the
told you,
Following contract?
42,862. Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to steal
No.
your thunder.
It's only a 5% increase.
Yeah, but that's why you can't say, well, across the board, the grid dictate, the percentages vary,
Because we're not having trouble hiring first year.
We are not as far off, at the first couple years as we are when you get within the grid. And that didn't used to be an issue, really, because you came and you stayed in a district. That is not what happens anymore.
Well, teaching has become like a business, and when you're in a company and you start out, whether you're an engineer, a doctor, a dentist, a teacher, you start out at a base salary, and as you gain experience, you say, oh, the grass is greener over there, so you go jump over there. That's normal attrition. It's business 101.
Right, so we need to pay people, further up the grid.
Yeah, I wanna, can I spin this a little bit? Multidimensional here. It's never one thing that attracts or detracts people coming in. Salary is one thing, but there's always at least one or two other dimensions. Leadership in the school, how the principal, I'm not gonna pontificate here, but I'm just saying, so I think leadership, environment, salary, and then the third dimension for me, and I wanna hear your thoughts on this, is 25% of our students are on an IEP in Ware. About 7% are on a 504, roughly.
Yeah.
The average in California, the whole state, is 13% IEPs. We're at 25, just this school district. And the 504s were 1.5%, we're at almost 7. How do, you're comparing salaries, but how do we compare as far as those numbers with our neighbors? And is that a factor for why some teachers don't wanna stay here? And it feels like we're on the high end.
So I do have, and I can share, I do have some numbers around that. New Hampshire is on the high end.
Okay.
And in some areas, we're in the high end. But I think I don't think what we're experiencing and what our students are experiencing is out of the ordinary from
Okay.
our neighbors. And one of the surveys I included, I did a comprehensive why I stay survey. We always do exit surveys of people why they leave, and you would take that seriously, but we had 80% of our folks across the SAU give us some input into why they stay. And so those details are included, and we broke it down by how long they've been here and all of that. So it is interesting to look at, because it affirmed for what I thought, that the leadership piece, the adult culture piece, we've done a lot of work on that, and I think it has had an impact. I have people really upset that they need to leave and go somewhere else, because they like this community and they like, but $12,000 or $20,000 is real money, and if you can make that not commuting very far, you're gonna do that.
Question. This package also handles the medical benefits. We have very good medical benefits. They want more salary, are they willing to cut on the medical benefits? Because companies across the board are decreasing their health insurance because it is skyrocketing. And if people want more money, they have to cut somewhere. Are the teachers willing to do that?
So the contract is negotiated, and that was not part of the negotiation. So it's staying the same. But when you look at a whole package, we do have very generous health insurance. It is comparable to our neighbors. But you look within a field. We're hiring you look within a field. You know if you're gonna be a teacher, you're not gonna make $1 million. That is part of but you do know you're gonna be part of a retirement system. You do know that you are gonna have good health insurance. And so that's part of the package of being a teacher.
I just wanna make a comment. Laura, you mentioned earlier about Goffstown has higher salaries. I don't think that matters to me, but Goffstown does have a different tax base, and I think comparing to our neighbors is good, but, I think we ought to compare what our tax base is to neighbors as well, kinda.
That's what I meant.
It's another
when they
dim-
had higher salaries.
Okay,
The
I
tax
just wanted to
base-
clarify what I thought.
Yeah, their tax base is much
Yeah.
higher than ours.
Yeah, we have a different profile of our tax, of who pays the taxes in this town. So Jessica was,
So it sounds like, at least theoretically, you think that higher salary will help with turnover to some extent. I'm not completely convinced that's the case. I think there's a lot of factors that go into people moving, people are more mobile, there's lots of reasons people move and, like Lori said, go from job to job. And, sometimes think the grass is greener elsewhere, whether it is or not. So I'm not totally convinced that that's gonna solve your problem. It might help a little bit, but I don't think it's gonna solve the problem. So my question is, are you looking at other strategies to help, whether it's help onboard new people, cause there's gonna be turnover? Are you looking at helping get those people up to speed? Are you looking at other strategies to, to mitigate the impacts of that, or other strategies to help either retain, other strategies to help get people onboarded and up to speed more quickly and help them get that experience that they need? Because I don't think it's gonna solve the problem overall.
And we have done a lot of work in exactly those areas, and I think you'll see from that teacher retention survey that people feel like we are a really supportive, and I have my neighbor colleagues all around thank me for the great job we've done training the teachers they go on to hire, and they go finish out their career in our neighboring districts, because we do a good job with that. All the time.
Okay, part of this is a discussion that this team will have when we decide to make recommendations, so it probably can move on at this point, unless there's a specific question about the contract itself.
Well,
Yes,
the contract represents what percentage increase as far as the taxpayers are concerned? And your proposed budget represents what kind of an increase, percentage increase as far as taxpayers are concerned?
The proposed budget represents a 1.25% increase.
That's on page 29. Okay?
And the... I have
First
that.
year of the contract is, what, 939?
Yeah, I had that somewhere, I apologize.
What is that?
4.8, 4.9%? 4.88, so 4.9% would be the first year of the contract.
4.9% of what's the base? It's
Of-
939 over what?
18,478?
$18,478,439.
901?
I got 5.1.
Stick with Tom.
Oh.
He's good at math.
Oh, 90, okay.
Is it 939? 939,000?
It is 901,795.
901, sorry.
Yep. When we cut the, positions, we had to update everything, so, we were trying to get ready for tonight.
So it's a 4.9% increase over the current budget.
Just the contract.
Okay. And the current budget is a 1.25% increase over the current budget.
The proposed is,
So the
yes.
two together would be roughly, what, 5.3%, 5.4%?
6 point.
6 point,
Sorry, 6.4%.
double the cost of living, double.
And this is at a time when the cost of living is 3.2%.
Yes.
Would it be possible for the school district to go back to its budget, proposed budget, and reduce it even further below the current reduction, so that the total increase of the contract plus the proposed budget is 3.2%?
I don't think that would be possible.
You could, if you wanted to, hands be praised to God, assume that the cost of healthcare will not be 12.1%.
Right, right, Right.
You could assume it would be a number that gives you the difference
right.
to bring the total cost to 3.2%, knowing that you are going to have in 24, 25, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of money that you don't spend because positions will not be filled for the full year, et cetera,
Yeah.
that will enable you to cover the cost of health care, if in fact it comes in
Right.
at the full 12.1%.
Right.
If you did something like that, then you're going to the taxpayers with two major important statements. Number one, our proposed budget is not just 1.25%, but whatever it is, significantly below the current budget, the default budget.
Yep.
And number two, even if we get the teacher's contract, the total package doesn't exceed the cost of living. Now, that's something that people can accept, because you're solving a problem
Right.
and paying for it partially by reducing our taxes. I know I know there's a lot of risk involved in that.
Right.
But if you're looking for something as important as you say the teacher's contract is, and you've persuaded me that it's vital, then there has to be additional belt tightening in order for the people of Ware to vote for this contract. And you can do it. Because next year, you'll be giving us back less than the money that we would get if you didn't do this.
Right now, I think that what we have to do is, as a committee, as a finance committee, work on our recommendations, and the voters will look at those recommendations and the contract and the budget and make their own decision. So, you know, I don't think we can speculate on what the voters are gonna do. We do, in our hands, we have the ability to make recommendations, which will go into the mailer, into the hands of the voters, and then they'll make up their minds. So, I mean, that I understand everything you're saying, Dale, except I don't think that speculation is really gonna go anywhere as tonight at this table.
No, Tom, it won't go anywhere tonight, but if the school board does not, if the school board, I guess it is, through the superintendent, does not come back with a lower proposed budget,
We're gonna have a short discussion.
then it's very likely that the proposed budget, whatever it is going to pass, but the teacher's contract will fail.
Well, and that's
And that's,
very heavily dependent on our recommendations. I think you'll find that's very consistent, that the people follow the recommendations of this committee when they vote. So, you know, that's all I'm saying. I'm not really disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is that let's focus on looking at the material that's in front of us, and over the next few weeks as we meet, decide what our recommendations are going to be. And this discussion is gonna be part of what leads to those recommendations. We're not gonna get to it tonight.
could I ask Jackie one other question of process?
Sure.
When is the last time that the last date that the board can make changes in its proposed budget?
I'll present at public hearing on the week of January 9th, 10th this year, for Ware. And then they, at their board meeting, because the board meeting, envelops the public hearing, they will, accept,
That's the public hearing, but isn't there a later date?
well, then they bring their budget to deliberative session.
Right, and at the deliberative session, either a member of the
Yep.
Voting public could move to
Yes.
reduce the bottom
Yes.
line, or the board itself. So,
Right, and they could bring something different to deliberative, too.
right, okay.
Right.
I just wanted to understand the timing of this.
Yep.
What's the public hearing date for John Stark?
The Friday, so 12th?
Well,
I know, we love to spend our Fridays at John Stark.
our recommendation could include numbers in it, reduction, or suggested, basically what you're saying could be the recommendation.
That
if
would
it's-
go to the deliberative session.
Yes.
Right,
And if
if
the
it isn't
deliberative
brought forward.
session made a change, our recommendation might change.
Sure,
That would go into
We
the,
don't just have to do a yay or nay.
Yay or nay.
can
We could
be
actually
very clear on what
Right.
we're looking
recommend
at.
additions or subtractions in number. Right, as a suggestion. Right.
Again, to come, that discussion will be part of what we
Right,
include.
right.
Anything else or any other questions? we all have expressed our philosophies, so.
Can I ask us a quick sidebar, just a particular one? When they had and that's still in the new contract, have you had any teachers take the early retirement for the healthcare benefits?
We have one, who's currently, and we have one who will start it at the
Okay.
end of this year.
All right. And the only other question I had on the paras, do you have any rough numbers of how many vacancies you had last year? When you got the contract to try and hire from within, what proportion are you still contracting out because you couldn't fill all the positions, or was it successful?
It was a mixed bag, as far as, we hired more, we have fewer open positions. I think we just have contracted, again, it's also shifting needs. I think we just entered into a contract for one or two, so,
Okay,
so it,
onesies and twosies is better than what it was
yes.
before.
So it wasn't the panacea, but it has made some impact.
Okay. So that was a successful contract.
Sure.
May I thank Jackie for her presentation, which was helpful, pointed, responsive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. I anticipate, am I coming back?
Probably. You can anticipate.
Year
Okay.
after year, we hope.
What's that?
You do owe us some information, some of us. some
Yes,
information
yes,
anyway,
yes.
so.
Yeah, we haven't set up a schedule, except we know that we're gonna meet on the 3rd of January, and then beyond that, we gotta set up a schedule for, and
After.
we'll get back through to everybody when we want you to return for more.
You will not see us next week.
Good, good. I mean, no offense, no offense.
A week off.
Thank you, thank you. You too.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, guys.
Yes.
Now,
Billy, you're gonna be busy.
No, you want me to start writing it?
did busy.
You want me to start writing it now?
You can write your portion anyway.
Yeah. Oh, no. She's got.
Oh, no, oh, no.
for
No,
obvious,
no, I
Yes,
meant
you can
what
have
you're
it.
doing, what you're doing is.
for obvious reasons, we're not gonna review the minutes of the last meeting
No,
tonight, since it was
'Cause I didn't do
yesterday.
them yet, so,
Really?
jeez. I have a full-time job too and a 10-month-old, so,
What, you like need to sleep at night or something?
yeah.
Increases in,
I have chickens at home. And a dog.
See you, Tristan.
Chickens,
Oh, I was like, what are Tristan?
making fun.
are we doing minutes or adjourning, or what do you want to do?
I think you should adjourn unless you have something else, anybody, did you go around
Neil,
the
do you have
table?
anything else you'd like to ask?
Discussion?
I'd like to go home.
What time on January 3rd?
I think we decided on 6:30.
6:30 for the
6:30, okay.
January meetings.
Tom, would you give us, probably for my benefit, but maybe for others, all the dates and times that we're meeting and when the various sessions are?
Hang on.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have all of those. As far as the sessions, we just, public hearing for John Stark is the 12th.
12th?
Public hearing for Ware Schools is the 9th.
10th, wasn't it?
10th? I thought she said 9th.
So where is the 10th, correct?
Right,
Not the 9th? And John Stark is 12th, the Friday.
Friday.
Oh, I'm getting confused.
So where is on the 10th?
January 10th is the Ware public hearing, and the
Yes.
Stark public hearing is January 12th.
Yes.
And what about the deliberative sessions?
February 7th and 9th.
Feb-
I don't know which order is which. Where?
Which is,
Of January?
February.
Oh,
what is the? 7th is where?
7th Ware, 9th John Stark. Wednesday and a Friday, like it is every year. Yep.
And Tom, do you know when we're going to be meeting next?
When we are going to be meeting next?
The
Yeah.
3rd, January
Wednesday, the
3rd.
3rd of January,
6:30.
January 3rd at 6:30.
and tentatively the 17th and 24th.
Yeah, we're not gonna put anything else on the table right now.
Okay.
We'll, I'm gonna check in with Naomi and figure out exactly what's available. We have different, We know we won't do it on the 10th.
Don't make any plans on Wednesdays in January.
Yeah,
Probably
that's
not.
probably a better idea.
I'm just waiting to hear back from Ted.
Aren't you on the ethics committee?
He didn't answer me.
Yes, but I don't know, the chair hasn't notified us that we're going to be meeting on a particular day.
Oh,
Well, rest up, folks.
that was fun. Let's do this again.
Do we have extra books for our missing
There's
members?
one, I have one, I have an extra,
JD on the James Drury.
that's an extra.
No, we didn't do anything yet.
Who else is
Missing.
not here?
Elizabeth.
James? Where's James? Drury.
Is there anything from last night? I looked for last night, I wasn't there.
No.
No,
They just did it orally.
Yeah, just.
there,
We
there
got
were
handouts.
handouts.
I didn't bring him downstairs, though. We can get yours now.
Okay.
Second.
Flip the script.
Great way to go.
All in favor of leaving?
No, we're not done yet. Have we voted? Have we adjourned?
Yes, we did.
All right, don't flip it. Nope.
Yes.
And I don't know